I'm Victoria, and I just watched my own father burn $38 million in front of our entire family. The look of pure, unadulterated hatred on his face as he snatched that check and set it ablaze is something I'll never forget. Yet, I just sat there smiling. It confused everyone, but it was the only reaction I could have. Growing up as a Grant meant something in our town. My grandfather, Maxwell Grant, wasn't just wealthy. He was a legend who had built Grant Enterprises from nothing. While everyone else saw the mansion and the luxury cars, I saw the man who would take me for ice cream every Sunday afternoon. He'd listen to my dreams as if they were the most important things in the world. "Victoria," he'd tell me, licking his double scoop of mint chocolate chip, "success isn't about what you have. It's about creating something meaningful that outlasts you." Even at 7 years old, I'd nod seriously, chocolate dripping down my fingers, taking in every word. Those Sundays were sacred. We'd walk through the botanical gardens he funded. And he'd teach me about every flower and tree. Sometimes we'd sit on our bench for hours, and he'd tell stories about starting his business in a tiny office with just 2 employees. He'd quiz me on business concepts that I shouldn't have understood at that age, but somehow I did. My father, Richard, on the other hand, was a complicated shadow in my life. As my grandfather's only son, he had everything handed to him. The best schools, connections, startup capital for his ventures. Yet nothing was ever enough. His businesses would flourish briefly under grandfather's guidance, then collapse when he ignored advice and made impulsive decisions. I remember the night I was 12, hiding at the top of the stairs while father screamed at grandfather in the study below. "Nothing I do is ever good enough for you," he shouted, the smell of whiskey reaching me even from my perch. "You give me these opportunities just to watch me fail?" "Richard, I give you opportunities because you're my son," grandfather replied evenly. "But you sabotage yourself every time. The Westlake deal collapsed because you didn't read the contract thoroughly, not because I set you up to fail." "And I suppose Victoria would have read it perfectly," my father spat. "Your precious granddaughter who can do no wrong." That was when I first understood that my father resented me, not just for having grandfather's attention, but for having his respect. My mother, Diana, tried her best to bridge these troubled waters. A former art curator who'd fallen in love with the charming son of a business magnate, she hadn't signed up for the level of dysfunction our family operated on. Still, she was the glue that kept holiday dinners from exploding into all-out war. "Your father loves you," she'd whisper to me after he'd missed another school play or a swim meet. "He just doesn't know how to show it properly." I'd nod, but even then, I knew the difference between absence and avoidance. Mother had her own cordial relationship with grandfather. He respected her intelligence and taste, consulting her on art acquisitions for the company and inviting her to cultural events. It was clear he thought his son had married up, which only fueled my father's resentment. When father's drinking got worse during my teen years, mother shielded me from the worst of it. She'd send me to stay with grandfather when father went on benders. Those weekends at grandfather's lake house became another sanctuary where I could breathe without the suffocating tension of my parents' home. My education choices became another battleground. Father insisted I pursue liberal arts. Something suitable for a society wife, he'd say dismissively. Grandfather never pushed me either way, but asked thoughtful questions about my interests and aptitudes. When I chose business school, father didn't speak to me for months. Following in the old man's footsteps, he sneered at Thanksgiving dinner that year. How original. What both of them failed to realize was that I made my choice independently. I had a natural affinity for business strategy and economics. Discovering this through school projects and my own reading. The fact that it aligned with grandfather's field was coincidental, though admittedly his stories had sparked my initial curiosity. After graduation, I shocked everyone by declining grandfather's offer to join Grant Enterprises. Instead, I took an entry-level position at Madison Financial, a competitor firm. "I need to know I can succeed on my own terms." I explained to grandfather over our Sunday ice cream, now a tradition we maintained even as adults. He smiled with pride. "That's exactly why you'd be perfect at Grant. But I respect your decision, Victoria. Forge your own path." What I didn't know then was that grandfather kept tabs on my career through industry connections. Every promotion I earned, every project I successfully led, he knew about it all. Collecting newspaper clippings and industry newsletter mentions of my accomplishments. My brother, Alex, took a different approach to family dynamics. 2 years younger than me, he aligned himself with our father early on. Perhaps seeing it as the path of least resistance. Where I challenged father's dismissive attitude, Alex mirrored it. Where I worked for my achievements, Alex leveraged the family name. "You're making everything harder than it needs to be," Alex told me after I refused to let him connect me with one of father's business associates for a shortcut promotion. "Why climb the ladder when you can take the elevator?" "Because I want to know every step," I replied. And so when I reach the top, no one can question how I got there. The final fracture between us came just 3 months before grandfather fell ill. Alex had been caught using company resources for personal expenses at the small division of Grant Enterprises that father had helped him secure. When I refused to cover for him during the internal audit, he accused me of betrayal. "Family protects family," he hissed in the hospital parking lot after visiting grandfather. "Not when it means compromising my integrity," I replied, "and not when it harms the company grandfather built. Always the perfect granddaughter." He sneered, "Must be nice to be the favorite." I watched him storm off, wondering when we had become such strangers. The truth was, I never asked to be anyone's favorite. I just wanted to be myself, to earn my own way. If that aligned with grandfather's values more than father's, it wasn't a strategic choice. It was just who I was. Little did I know then how these family fractures would soon crack wide open with 38 million reasons for the final breaking point. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. I was preparing for a crucial presentation when my phone lit up with my mother's number. "Victoria, it's grandfather. You should come to the hospital right away." My presentation forgot. I rushed across town to St. Mary's Medical Center. Grandfather had suffered a severe stroke. At 84, he was still sharp as ever mentally, but his body had been failing him gradually over the past year. That first day in the hospital established a pattern. I would arrive early before work, then return after and stay until visiting hours ended. Father would make perfunctory appearances, spending more time on his phone than with grandfather. Alex would visit sporadically, often with an air of obligation. Mother was a constant, a quiet presence by grandfather's side. Grandfather, though weakened, remained lucid. During one of my visits, he gestured for me to lean closer. "Victoria," he whispered, his voice raspy, "there are things you need to know about the company, things about its future." He spoke of a new trust, of trustees he had appointed, and of a vision for Grant Enterprises that extended beyond his lifetime. He spoke of integrity and legacy, and I listened intently, a sense of foreboding settling over me. He passed away peacefully 2 weeks later, surrounded by family. The funeral was a grand affair, a testament to his impact on the community. But the real drama, the true legacy, was yet to unfold. The will reading was held a week later in grandfather's study, a room filled with the scent of old books and leather. Mr. Henderson, grandfather's longtime attorney, cleared his throat and began. The initial bequests were straightforward: charitable donations, smaller sums to distant relatives, and generous trusts for my mother and Alex. Then came my turn. Mr. Henderson read, "To my beloved granddaughter, Victoria, who embodies the spirit of innovation and integrity upon which Grant Enterprises was built, I bequeath the sum of $38 million and, effective immediately, full controlling interest in Grant Enterprises, to be held in trust under the supervision of the appointed trustees for a period of 1 year, after which full control shall transfer to her." A stunned silence fell over the room. My father's face, already pale, turned a mottled red. Alex gasped. Mother looked at me with a mixture of shock and pride. "This is outrageous," father roared, leaping to his feet. "He can't do this. I'm his son. The company is mine." He lunged forward, snatching the check from Mr. Henderson's hand before the lawyer could react. With a flick of his wrist, he produced a lighter and held the check to the flame. The paper curled, then ignited, turning to ash in seconds. "There," he declared, his voice triumphant. his eyes burning with malice. "There goes your inheritance, Victoria. Now what will you do?" And that's when I smiled. A slow, quiet smile that spread across my face, confusing everyone even more. Father's triumphant sneer faltered. Alex looked bewildered. Mother's hand flew to her mouth. They thought they had witnessed my downfall. They thought the money, the company, was gone, but they hadn't understood grandfather at all. The real story began to unfold in the weeks that followed. The first sign that things were not as my father perceived came not from the trustees, but from Janet Spencer, grandfather's former executive assistant, who called me directly. "Victoria, something's happening at the office. External auditors arrived this morning without prior notice. Your father is not handling it well." I thanked her, unsurprised. The trustees had mentioned their intention to conduct a thorough review of the company's finances. What I hadn't expected was how quickly father's carefully constructed facade would begin crumbling. The family dinner that Sunday was a masterclass in tension. Father arrived late, disheveled and smelling faintly of whiskey. Alex kept checking his phone nervously. Mother maintained pleasant conversation about nothing important. A skill she'd perfected over decades of family dysfunction. "So," father finally said, setting down his fork with excessive force, "I suppose you've heard about the audit." I met his gaze steadily. "I've heard rumors." "Rumors?" he repeated. His laugh bitter. "Is that what we're calling it when the trustees your grandfather appointed start tearing apart everything I've built? Did you build it, though?" The words left my mouth before I could reconsider. Years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. "Or did grandfather build it and you just took credit?" Alex inhaled sharply. Mother closed her eyes briefly. "You know nothing about business," father spat. "Nothing about what it takes to run a company of that size. You've been playing at career with your entry-level position while I've kept Grant Enterprises profitable for decades." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "Because the preliminary audit doesn't suggest that's true." His face paled. "What do you know about the audit results?" I said nothing, letting his imagination fill the silence. "This is your doing," he accused. "Somehow you've orchestrated this whole thing, turned the trustees against me." "Richard," Mother interjected. "Victoria couldn't possibly have, couldn't she?" He turned on Mother now. "She's been manipulating the old man for years. All those private lunches, those weekend visits. She was playing the long game while we thought she was just being sentimental." The unfairness of his accusation stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "I loved him, that's all." "Oh, save it." Alex jumped in. "We all know you were his favorite. Now you've got everything and we're left with scraps." $1 million is hardly scraps, Alex," I pointed out. "It is compared to 38 million plus half the company," he shot back. "The company that's currently under audit for financial irregularities," I reminded him. "Maybe you should be grateful your trust is separate from the corporate assets." Father's expression changed then, calculation replacing anger. "You know," he said slowly, "this audit could damage the company's reputation. Stock prices could fall, your inheritance might not be worth as much as you think." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's a reality," he replied. "Unless someone steps in to manage the situation, someone with experience handling corporate crisis." And there it was, the pivot to self-interest I'd been expecting. Father wasn't concerned about the company or its employees. He was concerned about leveraging whatever influence he still had. "The audit will proceed," I said firmly. "Grandfather wanted transparency, and so do I." "Then you're a fool," Father snapped. "This company operates in the real world. Not in some idealistic fantasy where everything is above board. There are arrangements, understandings, ways of doing business that won't look good under a microscope." I leaned forward. "Are you admitting to improper business practices, Father?" He realized his mistake immediately. "Don't twist my words. I'm talking about the normal complexities of running a global enterprise, something you know nothing about." "But I'm learning," I replied calmly, very quickly. The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with Father storming out and Alex following after, throwing me one last resentful glare. Mother and I sat in the aftermath. The elegant dining room suddenly too large, too quiet. "He's afraid," she said finally. "He's terrified of being exposed." "As what?" I asked. She met my eyes directly. As less than what your grandfather was, less than what you might become. The following week brought the first real crisis. The audit had uncovered significant discrepancies in the Westridge acquisition, and the board called an emergency meeting. Father, still technically the CEO, though with reduced authority under the new trust arrangement, was required to explain the financial projections that had justified the purchase. I attended as a major shareholder, sitting quietly in the back while Father presented increasingly convoluted explanations for the numbers that simply didn't add up. The board members, many of them grandfather's longtime associates, exchanged concerned glances. "Mr. Grant," said Howard Sullivan, the audit committee chair, "these revenue projections exceed industry standards by nearly 40%. What data supports this level of optimism?" Father shuffled through his papers. The proprietary technology Westridge was developing promised significant market advantages. The technology that third-party evaluators have now deemed commercially unviable, Howard pressed. The meeting continued in this vein for hours, with Father's explanations growing thinner and more defensive. By the end, it was clear to everyone present that the acquisition had been a serious misstep, possibly driven by factors beyond sound business judgment. As we were leaving, Alex approached me in the parking garage. His expression different than I'd seen recently. Less hostile, more concerned. "That was bad in there," he said, glancing around to ensure we were alone. "Yes, it was," I agreed. "Did you know?" Before I could answer, he added. "About the Westridge deal? Did grandfather know?" "Grandfather was a meticulous man, Alex," I replied carefully. "He always insisted on thorough due diligence. If he didn't approve it, there was a reason." Alex nodded slowly, a dawning realization in his eyes. Father always said grandfather was too old-fashioned, too cautious. "Sometimes caution is wisdom," I said, "and sometimes it's the difference between building a legacy and tearing it down." The audit continued for months, a slow, painful unraveling of my father's tenure. It revealed a pattern of reckless spending, questionable investments, and a disregard for corporate governance. The board, guided by the trustees, began to take decisive action. Father was formally removed as CEO and transitioned to a ceremonial advisory role, stripped of all real power. Alex, implicated in some of the smaller financial irregularities, was quietly encouraged to resign from his division. The company, though shaken, began the painstaking process of recovery. My role, initially as a major shareholder under trustee supervision, quickly expanded. I found myself attending more board meetings, reviewing financial reports, and offering strategic insights. The trustees, impressed by my understanding of the company and my commitment to grandfather's vision, began to rely on me heavily. The one-year supervision period, which had seemed like an eternity, became a rapid-fire education. I learned the intricacies of corporate law, the nuances of market dynamics, and the delicate art of leading a diverse team. I made mistakes, of course, but I learned from them, always remembering grandfather's words. "Success isn't about avoiding failure, Victoria. It's about learning to stand up again, stronger than before." One afternoon, about 6 months after the will reading, I found myself in grandfather's study, now my office. The room felt different, less like a museum and more like a living space. I was reviewing a complex acquisition proposal when my phone rang. It was Father. I hesitated, then answered. "Victoria," he said, his voice devoid of its usual bluster, sounding tired. I need your help." He was facing a personal financial crisis, a result of his poor investments and mounting debts. He had nowhere else to turn. It was a moment I had anticipated. A test of my own character. I could have refused, could have let him face the consequences alone. But grandfather had taught me about compassion, even for those who had wronged you. "What do you need, Father?" I asked, my voice steady. I didn't offer him a handout, but I connected him with financial advisors and helped him restructure his debts, setting clear boundaries and expectations. It was a difficult conversation, but it was a beginning. A small step towards healing. Alex, too, began to change. After leaving Grant Enterprises, he struggled to find his footing. He reached out to me, not for a handout, but for advice. He was starting a small consulting firm, leveraging his network, but this time, he was doing the work himself. I offered guidance, shared contacts, and even invested a small amount in his venture, not as a shortcut, but as a show of faith. He was still Alex, but there was a newfound humility, a willingness to earn his way. A year to the day after grandfather's death, I stood before his grave. The inscription on the stone was simple: Maxwell Grant. He built more than he took. "We're doing well," I told him quietly, placing fresh flowers beside the stone. "The company is strong. The family is healing, slowly, but healing nonetheless." I smiled, imagining his pleased nod. "I think you knew this would happen, that your decisions would force us all to grow in ways we'd resisted." A gentle breeze rustled the nearby trees, and I took it as his response. Back at my apartment that evening, I reviewed the notes for tomorrow's foundation board meeting. The Maxwell Grant Foundation had become my personal passion. Using a portion of my inheritance to fund educational opportunities for students who, like grandfather himself, came from humble beginnings but showed exceptional promise. My phone buzzed with a text from Ella Hodges. "First-year review complete. All conditions met. Full control transfers to you tomorrow per the terms. Congratulations." The message marked the official end of the one-year supervision period grandfather had established. While the trustees had gradually given me increasing autonomy as I demonstrated capability, tomorrow would finalize the process. The responsibility was sobering, but no longer intimidating. I poured a small glass of grandfather's favorite scotch, our ritual, and raised it in a silent toast. The journey from that shocking will reading to today had transformed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. I discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, wisdom I hadn't realized I'd absorbed, and the capacity to lead with both firmness and compassion. The path hadn't been easy. There had been sleepless nights wrestling with difficult decisions, moments of doubt about my capabilities, and painful confrontations with family members. But through it all, I'd held to the principles grandfather had modeled: integrity, persistence, and the courage to stand firm when necessary. Father's burning of that check, his theatrical attempt to block my inheritance, now seemed almost comically futile. Not because the money had already been secured through grandfather's foresight, but because the true inheritance had never been about the money at all. It had been about character, values, and vision. Things that couldn't be destroyed by fire or spite. My smile in that moment hadn't been smugness or secret knowledge, though that's what everyone assumed. It had been recognition, sudden and profound. That grandfather had prepared me for exactly this test. That in trying to hurt me, father had actually revealed precisely why grandfather had chosen me as a successor. The following morning, I woke early and went for a run along the river path grandfather and I had often walked. The city was just coming alive, the sunrise painting the buildings in gold and promise. At our bench, I stopped to catch my breath and watched the water flow past, constant yet ever-changing, like the business he'd built and entrusted to my care. Life would continue bringing challenges. I knew the business world was unpredictable. Family healing was rarely linear, and personal growth never truly ended. But I faced these prospects with a quiet confidence that had been hard-won through this year of transformation. The wealth grandfather had left me provided security and opportunity, but his greatest gift had been believing in me before I fully believed in myself. By seeing my potential and creating circumstances that forced me to rise to challenges. He'd given me something far more valuable than money. He'd given me the chance to discover my own strength. As I left the park and headed home to prepare for the day ahead, I thought about that moment in the study one last time. The shocked faces. The burning check, my unexpected smile. In the flames of father's anger, I hadn't seen destruction. I'd seen illumination. The fire hadn't consumed my inheritance. It had revealed its true nature. Some lessons can only be learned through fire. Some strength can only be discovered through challenge. And some smiles aren't about what's been gained, but about what can never be taken away. I'd lost my grandfather, but I'd found myself. And that, I knew, was exactly what he'd intended all along. Have you ever had someone believe in you when you didn't yet believe in yourself? Or experienced a moment when what seemed like a loss actually revealed something more valuable? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of family healing and personal growth resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this message today. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovering that our greatest inheritance is often the strength we never knew we had.